welcome to episode 239 of Silver Lining for Learning. This is season 6, by the way, of Silver Lining for Learning. Today's episode is on a topic that we're not probably even going to talk about, mobile learning and GenAI for the less privileged refugees and the global south. Well, we'll talk about it for a bit. We have 3 people who were born and raised in the UK on this show, one of whom is now in the United States, who was a teacher in the UK and got her PhD and moved to Old Dominion University, none other than Helen Crompton, who's flying a plane right now north of Michigan. I don't know if to escape this country or to head to Toronto with Lydia, but she is the executive director of research of the Research Institute for Digital Innovation and Learning at Old Dominion University Global. She is also a professor of instructional technology at Old Dominion University and in the top 2% of scientists in the world, according to a Stanford list. She has 2 new books on artificial intelligence, AI applications in K-12, AI applications in higher education. She also wrote a book with one of our other guests today, who is John Traxler. She edited the book, I should say. John is professor of digital learning at the University of Wolverhampton, the Institute of Education in the UK. He's also the UNESCO chair in innovative informal digital learning in disadvantaged and development context. And uniquely, he is also a chair of the Commonwealth of Learning, where we've had people on this show a couple of times, including recently with Sanjaya Mishra a few weeks ago. He has many mobile learning books, and he's been in Africa doing professional development of teachers via mobile learning. Maybe he can talk about that in a little bit. He's got mobile learning, the next generation, mobile learning in mathematics, mobile learning in STEM, case studies, mobile learning higher education challenges, critical mobile pedagogy, on and on and on. Also has one with Helen, digital learning in higher education, COVID-19 and beyond. Mike Sharples, who was in season 2 of this show back in episode 65, talking about learning at scale. If you remember that episode, if not,
it was a long time ago. Yeah, but I remember.
Let's just say I run every day and I'm a lot slower now. It's that long ago. Mike was in Nottingham, I think, the first time I corresponded with him doing mobile learning stuff. He moved to the Open U, where he is now emeritus professor of educational technology at the Institute of Educational Technology, the Open U in the UK. He has various books, including How We Write, including Practical Pedagogy. His research is centered on human-centered design of new technologies and environments for learning. I could go on and on about all 3 of these people, but just say that they've been making a contribution to this field for decades. And maybe we need to have them reflect on what's new before we start on this. And we already asked John, he's got the warm-up questions. So John has chatted with us a bit. What's new, John, in your world?
Okay, so I am still a UK professor and, as you say, a chair of various things, but now work part-time for a European edtech company. Partly because they see the need, perhaps the competitive need, to be more research informed, more research aware, both in terms of perhaps emerging topics and perhaps in terms of methods. So, not believing everything they read and trying to make everything they write slightly more trustworthy. So it's kind of a cultural thing partly, but partly it's looking at what might be topics of commercial significance. And whilst we were kind of thrashing around in the early days looking for such topics, rightly or wrongly and quite predictably, that topic became AI, and more AI. And the company is particularly interested in the ethics of AI, safeguarding, making it more trustworthy, and trying to get more diverse pedagogies into what we do. And I'll stop selling it in a second, but we have one tool that has about 80% of the UK vocational market. And we've kind of got our foot in the door being a teacher's assistant, if you like. So, and on the basis of how many hours of teachers' effort this thing saves. So now we're trying to broaden that and bring more pedagogic diversity into it, and actually to attempt to turn some of Mike's ideas and suggestions into tangible, product, I suppose. Yeah. So I'll stop. That's it. I can carry on selling if you like.
Well, I should say, and thank you, John. I should say my co-host with me today, Lydia Cow from the University of Toronto, where she studied a new tenure track position there. Punya Mishra, the creative genius behind Silver Lining for Learning, coming from Arizona State University, and Chris Dede from Harvard University, where he's been for a couple of decades now. Helen Crompton has shown up. She got off the plane that she flew. She likes flying over Niagara Falls, I know that. And now she flew north of Michigan. I assume she likes the Great Lakes, anyhow. What we're asking people is to talk about what's new in your life. And we'll let you think about that for a second while Mike chimes in. Mike Sharples, would you like to tell us what's new in your life in terms of professional life, anyways?
Okay. And well, the last 3 years have been pretty weird for me because it feels like my career has come full circle. So my first degree was in computing sciences. My PhD was in artificial intelligence. I think I was the first person to do a PhD in generative AI in education. So developing tools to help children develop their skills in creative writing. And that was 1984. And then I went on to have a career in education technology, including, and we'll come back to this, mobile learning and learning at scale. And then I took retirement from the Open University. I was just starting to enjoy it, writing a book with a colleague, Rafael Perez, called Story Machines, How Computers Have Become Creative Writers. And I heard about this new tool called GPT-2 from a startup called OpenAI. And so I got early access to it. I tried it and I realized it could generate pretty good stories, much better than previous generations of AI. But not only stories, it could also generate student assignments, it could generate academic articles. And I realized that it was both hugely influential, hugely valuable, but also hugely disruptive. And so I started tweeting and blogging about it, began consultancy with universities, with other organizations, governments, about how you can cope with this new form of AI, particularly the disruption to academic integrity. If millions of students are now equipped with technology that can generate assignments for them, that can do learning for them, they can offload their learning onto the AI. What does this mean for the integrity of education institutions? So the last 2 years have been pretty busy, and it does feel like my whole career has come full circle.
Thanks, Mike. Helen, before you tell us about what's new, tell us where you landed your plane and why you went there.
Yes, I'm actually in Michigan at Oakland University. So I'm giving talk, but then working on an AI kit for faculty going back. So that's exciting. And the professor that invites me also has 2 planes. So I've been getting flying lessons. But we were flying to another place in Michigan and we just literally landed in quick. It was later than normal because of weather. So yeah, very sorry about being a few minutes late. I was in a panic there, but they managed to quickly get me into a lab the other side. So I am in a fabulous lab over here, if anyone that can see. So for me, it's great, first of all, to be on the podcast with major people that I've been following myself throughout my career. So it began with mobile learning. And I was very interested in the fact that, you could learn anywhere, anytime with these devices that kind of extended your thinking, that allowed you to get access. And I always remember I did my PhDs at UNC Chapel Hill, and my advisor said, mobile learning, it's a fad. It's not going to do anything. And I was going,
Probably right.
And obviously, yeah, the iPads or anything else like that were not out at the time, but I went all in for mobile learning. And that panned out very well as we helped navigate many other people looking at what we do with mobile devices, and we still do. But then the change to AI happened 2017. I've been looking into AI, and then ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, they asked me to develop a course for K-12 teachers in artificial intelligence. And so while I was developing that, and apparently it was one of the first in the world, and when I was looking into that, it was, oh, this is big. This is very big. We need to pay attention to this. And so after doing that, literally all my talks, I was saying to people, look, can I do a little bit of artificial intelligence in with this? And they were kind of going, oh, okay. And I've been persuading people, look, this is big coming in. I remember having a chat with you, John, when you talking about AI, and you were going, oh, is it, do you think it's going to do something?
Did I?
And it was kind of, yes, this is going to be huge. And my research pivoted over to AI. So I looked at a whole systematic review on K-12, another one on higher ed. I think, can't remember where I published them, what times, but I did a lot of work early kind of looking at that, but I wasn't ready for ChatGPT still. That kind of took things to a whole new level. But yes, I mean, with generative AI, we have to remind people as well, it's not just appeared. I was working in South Africa in 2021, I think it was, and we were looking then at different types of programs that we could use. I mean, even the dance ones, there was one where I could just collect my image of my face and my body, and it made me look like I could dance. And I can tell you, I cannot dance. But then Deep Dream and things like that, we could do things with images, but now it's in a very different space. So that is how I'm here at the moment. And as many others have said here, yes, we're super busy at the moment, trying to help everybody understand and kind of come to terms with the fact that it's here and it's not going away. And I like to go on the idea of, here's all the things, the misuses and limitations. Okay, they're very real. This is the state of the field. However, it's not going away. It's here and it's moving along, and we need to figure out the best ways of using it. So I'm kind of often on the, yeah, these are here, let's deal with it, but let's see what we can do with it. I'm kind of on the, let's figure out a plan, use it the best way possible, and help people develop digital literacy skills, AI skills, literacy, in what to do.
So before we open, I have my opening question, then we'll open up for my co-host. Helen, Mike mentioned his book project. You've got 2 recent books published. Would you like to mention them as well for our listening audience?
Yes, I can do. We had one on K-12, whole one with Rutledge, and then another one, AI in higher education. So I developed that with Agnes Chigoni and Diane Burke. In fact, sorry, I've had 3 books this year. One's with Agnes, focusing on more global, but then the AI books are with Diane Burke. But they were ready last year, but then they were published just at the beginning of this year. But as for the titles, I'm sorry, I cannot remember off the top of my head what the titles are. There was that many publications going around left, right, and center, which is a good problem to have. But if people search Rutledge, Helen Crompton, AI K-12 or AI higher education, I'm sure they'll pop up on the screen.
So the title of the show is Mobile Learning for GenAI for the less privileged refugees in the Global South. Could any of you, the 3 of you, relate stories of how your research, how your work has impacted those in the Global South and the less privileged? I'll start with John, because I know you worked in Africa quite a bit with mobile learning projects. Would you like to tell us what you were doing in Africa with teacher training and
Yes, and
how
well, sorry,
yeah,
more
go ahead.
recently in Palestine, Gaza, and other parts of the Middle East with the refugee Palestinian community. Kind of, in many ways, I'm um, saddened and depressed, in a sense, by how perhaps as a research community we didn't break out of the enclosures of our research environment and have a um, wider, perhaps diluted impact on people's lives. And so, and didn't achieve, I suppose, either sustainability, equity, or scale much of the time. I mean, it seemed to be, um, well, Helen might have been right. Perhaps it was a niche. I mean, I think it transformed the nature of learning because it makes it allows people, not just students, allows people to produce their own images, text, ideas, opinions, information, and to share them and to discuss them, merge them, broadcast them, store them. But outside the context of formal education, and to create, if you like, a different economy of knowledge. So rather than knowledge being something, if you like, produced and disseminated top down from within the education system, as being something that people, in a far more demotic, if not democratic sense, could do amongst themselves. I mean, the story I might tell was one from being commissioned by the International Telecommunications Union to give them guidance on producing MOOCs to be distributed in Global South. And we had a rather heated conversation with me saying, look, there's a man with a mobile phone standing in a field in Ghana telling his colleagues how to produce yams, and you think you're going to do any better in an office in Geneva? And he was posting them on YouTube. And if it was ginger, okay, ginger, not yams, same thing. People are producing that kind of information. They're discussing it and they're distributing it. And in some senses, it's all that mobile learning should have been and ended up not being. So that's the sense in which I'm saddened. I mean, maybe we learned a lot about theories of learning, but I'm not sure how far they reached beyond the duration of our projects and the people we did them with.
Sorry, I was muted, which is a common critique of the educational technology space.
Yes, perhaps. Yes. Okay. So we could have had personal response systems, virtual worlds, and any interactive whiteboards, and any number of other expensive technologies. And in fact, sorry, to continue the previous story, in some senses, eLearning Africa, which kind of is a conference and kind of is a trade show, you could see people, companies promoting interactive whiteboards. And I had a conversation with their rep some years ago saying, look, you're trying to sell these things to villages that haven't even got electricity, and communities that are on $1 a day. And the rep said they'd help them crowdfund them. That struck me as utterly surreal.
We've had a show with the host, the creator of eLearning Africa, last summer, actually. Mike, would you like to extend what John has said or take us in a new direction?
Yeah, I mean, I guess John and I have often played sort of not good cop, bad cop, but rather unhappy cop and happy cop, if you like. And so I'm going to take the optimistic viewpoint, and particularly from the Open University. So for those of you who don't know, the Open University, I mean, many countries now have open universities, but the original one was in the UK, set up at the end of the 1960s. And it's hard now to envision just how radical it was to set up a university, a research active university that was open to anybody to do a degree. You didn't have to have a qualification to take an open university degree. That many of the materials were open access, and that you could access it from wherever you are. Originally by materials that were sent out to students, but then later using telephone, collaboration with the BBC so that you could access it using TV. And then when the internet came in, then you could access it online. And also trying to accommodate people with a wide range of abilities and disabilities. So it was a hugely radical innovation at the time in the 1960s. And nobody thought that it would survive, least of all the people who set it up, particularly during the Thatcher government in the 1980s. But it did. It survived. 2 million people have taken Open University degrees. And then when handheld mobile devices came in, then we extended that, particularly around MOOCs, massive open online courses, to enable people to take free online courses. And over 20 million people have taken free online courses. So it's hard to think back now, what would have happened if there hadn't been an open university in the UK, if there hadn't been massive open online courses, because we've taken it so much for granted. And I think this is one of the big issues with education technology. When it comes, we very rapidly take it for granted. And it's very hard to say, what would have happened if it wasn't there. But I really want to take a positive view. And also I want to try and recast mobile learning away from a focus on the technology and towards the mobility of the learner. So that's what the Open University did. It was offering courses, degree-level courses, to people from their own location. Taxi drivers, for example, they were one of the most frequent users of Open University courses because they could take their courses as they were traveling, as they were parked up in their taxis. Prisoners, so people who are incarcerated. So those people who didn't have access before now have access through, not just in the UK, but now it's been replicated and extended in many countries. We recently had a seminar with Sri Lanka, for example, and they have a very active, prosperous open university there. So I want to take the optimistic view, which is that mobile learning is about the mobility of the learner and offering them educational opportunities wherever they are to support their needs and their abilities.
Thanks, Mike. John had a comment. Do you want to share that, John?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was an insight I had at eLearning Africa many years ago when I was there promoting, doing the company line on mobile learning and its capacity to reach out, and its capacity to extend learning. And I realized actually what I was saying was its capacity to extend our learning, the way we understand the world. And I think I made the point that actually many people in Africa were probably safe from digital learning because it would never reach them. But sadly, I was more worried about mobile learning because of its capacity to reach them, and its capacity to reach into their lives with our ways of thinking, and the ways in which that put their ways of thinking at risk. And I don't know if that is, I'm not sure if that's an educational remark or a technological remark, but a remark about the hegemony of large mainstream cultures to steamroller smaller marginal ones. It's the capacity of our cultures to steamroller indigenous, marginal, fragile, peripatetic, nomadic cultures, or indeed those of refugees, for example. So I ended up feeling very kind of ethically ambivalent.
So I will say that we did have a show four episodes ago, episode 235, Blended is Best, Case Studies of Blended Learning in Higher Education with Sanjaya Mishra and Santosh Panda, that they talked about their new book, Handbook of Open Universities Around the World from Routledge. So if anyone's interested in what Mike had to say about open universities, they might get a hold of that new book.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I assume you know Sanjaya.
Yeah.
And his work. Yeah. So Helen, would you like to jump
Yes.
in?
Yeah, so let me take it from a different angle as well. In South Africa, in fact, all sub-Saharan Africa, I looked for the United Nations at ways of empowering women. And there was multiple different ways that we found with mobile devices, such as the women coming out of the fields, they had their crops and they were going to sell those crops at market. And with a mobile device, it was just a basic phone. It could send a quick text message telling them how much their crop was worth that day, that empowered them financially to be able to argue, for what their crops was worth. So that was just one way. And it is a device that's literally allowed them to have financial freedom in multiple different directions. But that's just one quick story that way. I also want to kind of jump on the refugee one as well for mobile learning and AI. What happened was I was asked by the Greek government to go over to Lesbos, just off the Greek coast, the little island that had so many Syrian refugees that just literally came in pretty much overnight, that they literally took over the population of islanders. And so they asked me to go in and worked in Karatepe, which was a small refugee camp, well, fairly small in relative to many others. And what we did is we noticed, okay, young children were not getting any learning whatsoever. So there were going to be a whole generation lost. So using the mobile devices, and literally out of many refugees literally have the mobile device and nothing else, clothes or anything. The one thing that mattered was the mobile device to connect them to families, to find out where their status was and things like that. So what we did is we used that and then developed just a basic old-fashioned AI expert system to say, okay, tell us the details. Okay, your child is this age, they want to study this. Here's some maps that they can get. And we looked for, like John said, we looked for downloadable ones, and that they could literally go into the town, download them, power up the mobile devices, then come back to the tents, wherever they were staying at the camp, and then be able to continue learning. So that's kind of an example that I always remember from that way. And that was 2019, early 2018, 2019. So they were thinking about doing that. And I was excited for AI to be able to provide this opportunity of sorting through all these programs to help say, oh, this is one you might want to look at.
Great. I think Chris is going to jump in here now. Chris?
Yes, well, thank you for the overview about the evolution of mobile learning. And now, as the title of the episode reflects, people are thinking about GenAI. I went to a conference in April sponsored by the Center for International Development at Harvard, which is part of the Kennedy School of Public Policy. They have this big sort of policy conference once a year. There was a panel in the afternoon. Several of the participants were high-ranking officials from different African countries, and they were talking about the map to not only educational success, but economic success by using GenAI and mobile learning. And then the fourth panelist spoke up and said, well, you need to recognize that right now, GenAI is heavily subsidized. And when that stops, it's going to be very expensive compared to sort of classic symbolic AI. And you need to recognize that if you want not our education, but your education, you're going to need to invest in your own language models. And you're going to need to invest in your own data centers. And none of the calculations are taking this into account. You're all basing this on essentially free GenAI that somehow magically morphs into what you would want it to be for your culture and for your country. And there was a long silence in the room after that. But I do think that the point of that speaker, which is don't go too far with GenAI. Look at what you can do without any AI. Look at what you can do with hybrid AI, where you're using knowledge-based AI, which is not expensive at this point as a mature technology, instead of just chucking everything into GenAI. So I wonder your thoughts about that. I thought the panelists made some good points, but I'm curious as to whether you're hearing people say similar things, whether you would agree or disagree with that analysis.
It sounds perfectly plausible, and my concern would be as soon as it becomes a financial issue, it becomes an equity issue, and it becomes more accessible to richer people.
Okay, I'd like to come in, and I think to counter that, which is we're still at a very early stage, and the large language models at the moment have been developed, powered by huge investments in the US. We're kind of reaching a plateau in terms of the amount we can scoop up from the web. So it's not, I think, that they're going to get huge amounts more data. Meanwhile, there are other entrants into the field. Obviously, there's China with DeepSeek and with other language models now, but also Europe. So Mistral, EPFL in Switzerland is using its supercomputer to develop a large language model that will compete with the US ones. And it's been trained from the ground up around EU, European principles, and multi-language. So it's not, it's being trained on a large range of European, but also other languages. So a multilingual large language model. And there are over 1,000 now foundation LLMs. So one point I really want to make now is that AI is not just a thing, any more than the World Wide Web is a thing or the internet is a thing. It's already a huge diversity of different models and tools. And that's only going to grow when we get agentic agent-based AI, when we get multimodal AI, when we get embodied AI. So it's going to be a huge range, and it's going to be infused into everything that we do. So the first thing I want to say is it's not just a matter of, do we adopt AI or don't we adopt AI? It's like saying, do we adopt the internet or do we adopt electricity? Yeah. It's going to be there. But we have got choices to make. And this is what I keep emphasizing to the universities that I work with and even governments that I work with. We have choices we can make. Big choices between a closed and an open model. And I can talk a bit more about the advantages of each, but one of the advantages of an open model is that you see how it's being trained, certainly the more recent ones, and that you can also build on top of it. And you can run it locally so that none of the data goes out to a third party. So you have a choice between closed models and open models. And then from the open models, you have already a choice from European ones, Chinese ones, US ones, and soon there will be Indian ones and so on from many other countries. So I am more optimistic that soon there will be a diversity of models and a diversity of tools, and we have to make choices and well-informed choices, which is why AI literacy is so important now. And it's, so the universities, I think, are making wrong choices, just saying we'll go with Microsoft or we'll go with OpenAI and set up a partnership. It's like saying, we'll let Microsoft operate all our web systems. It's too early to make that sort of irrevocable choice. So I think we need to work with institutions to help them make good choices. And to say, look, there's a diversity of different tools. Some of them are generative AI, some of them are symbolic AI, there will soon be hybrid AI. Let's work to make those good choices.
Okay, we haven't heard from Helen, and Chris might have a comment after Helen, and then we go to Lydia after that. Helen.
Oh, well, I was just going here because I agree with Mike entirely. I mean, we're seeing that constant competition coming. Give examples. OpenAI said, oh, we've got DeepSeek, $200 a month. That's what it's going to cost you. And then we had a different one coming in from China and other parts that literally within about a week, they said, oh, we're dropping it down to $20 now. So we've seen that competition. And thankfully, we're getting multiple other competition from throughout the world because they are still trying to creep up. But as Mike said exactly there, that we need to keep everything open, see what there is, make good choices, and use, again, digital literacy in helping us make those choices. I really can't add much more to Mike's because I thought that was perfect.
Well,
Just
a quick comment. I agree with what you're saying. Clay Christensen, my late colleague, talked about disruptive innovation, and one of his examples was that mini computers disrupted mainframes, which desktop computers disrupted minis, and laptops disrupted desktops. And here we are talking about how mobile devices are disrupting laptops and so on. But in each one of those stages, the companies that controlled the current market fought tooth and nail against the innovation and said, you don't need these crazy desktop computers. Just buy time on our mainframe.
Yeah.
And the same thing is going to happen with these large language models and these big multinational companies that have sunk huge amounts of money into them. So it's going to, the evolution will take place, but it's not going to be painless on the part of anybody involved, because there's a lot of misinformation that's being put out by big companies, and there's a lot of not leveling the playing field that's coming out from big companies.
Sorry, Chris's remark made me think that there always seemed to be a persistent kind of flaw in the way we talk about mobile technologies, because they're portrayed as a logical technological continuation. We start with mainframes, and then we have minis, and then we have laptops, and they're perceived to be part of that evolution or part of that trajectory. And maybe in purely technological terms they are, but in social terms, how they are used and perceived and consumed, they're definitely not, because apart from anything else, the functionality is far more comprehensive. People are using them as televisions and record players and telephones and all sorts of other things within a social context which is largely ignorant of the earlier, 30, 40, 50 years of the development of computers. So in some senses, I think seeing mobile learning as, again, part of a trajectory which started with desktop learning is now rather flawed. I mean, it might have made sense 20 years ago when mobile learning was happening within universities and access to mobiles was within projects within universities that gave students access to their mobile as a continuation of what they might have previously done with their desktop. But now people's experiences are shaped by the social experiences of using mobiles, by the recreational, the musical, the subversive, the personal, the pornographic, and all sorts of other reasons for an experience of using mobiles that has got nothing to do with that earlier 40-year trajectory.
Could I just add a little bit? Well, I've been really interested in when technology goes from personal to social. And I think there have been three main disruptors from that have been really disrupted education. One of them is mobile devices, which is where learners have a device in their hand which allows them to access a huge amount of information, but it's also a social device. They can share information, they can share knowledge, and it's also they can go down rabbit holes, they can go into silos and so on. So it's disruptive in many ways. Second one was COVID, which took the whole world, not just the education system, by surprise. And universities that had been saying for 20 years, oh, we must develop online learning, suddenly had to do it in 2 weeks. And then the third one is AI. Now, again, with COVID, it started off as individual will put our material online, but rapidly it had to get more social. They had to use Zoom, and COVID was a time when Zoom and Teams took off. The same thing is going to happen with AI. Up until now, it's been seen as a kind of personal interaction. You write a prompt, you get a response. AI is going to follow the other disruptions. It's going to go social. And once AI goes social, it's both going to be hugely powerful, but hugely disruptive, because everything that you can think of doing in your social life, whether it's game playing, pornography, social interaction, chats, misinformation, AI is going to supercharge that. And we haven't even thought yet about what the impact of that is going to be on education, but also on entertainment and on our social life in general. So it's just, laying down a marker that AI is going to go social, and we need to be thinking about that.
Can I just jump in with a quick comment?
Go ahead.
Mike,
Go ahead.
thank you for saying what you did, because I think one of the things that we really haven't realized about this technology is that it truly is a psychological technology. Most of the technologies, we can talk about them as being epistemic, we can talk about them as cultural. This is both of those and one more on top of it. This is the first time ever in the entire history of human civilization we have one where we can actually engage with in natural language. They're deliberately being designed for us to anthropomorphize them with the psychophancy and all of that. And just wanted to underscore what you said, because that's something that I've been obsessed with for a while now, and I just don't see the requisite attention being paid to it. So whenever I see descriptions of AI literacy, I think one of the biggest things is like, what are our cognitive biases? Like, it really is about thinking about ourselves, understanding ourselves better as to how we can be manipulated by these systems than anything else. Anyway, I could go on and on about that. I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because I find that, and Helen is smiling because she has heard me rant about this before. So
Before we go,
anyway,
thank you.
I'll let it get back to, I think Lydia had something to go. I have a completely different tangent for us to take us on, but we'll wait for that one.
Yep. Before we go to Lydia, I just want to say, on the trail today, my phone fell off and went into the woods, and my audiobook stopped about, I'm like, where'd my phone go? I panicked. So in terms of Mike's number one change, we're learning all the time wherever we are, untethered typically to our various learning pursuits. But I did find it eventually. I panicked. Lydia's been waiting patiently. Lydia, would you like to continue this conversation with another question or comment?
Yeah, I want to extend this conversation about mobile learning and GenAI. I think we highlight one of the risks of GenAI going social in a bad way, not in a very pro-social way. And what are some promises you see when GenAI is being used in mobile learning, and what other some risks we need to pay attention to?
Want to go, Helen? Oh.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So misuses and limitations of GenAI, there's the obvious ones, and obviously connected to mobile learning and non-mobile is the issues of, in education, cheating, the hallucinations that it can have. There's just so many. I think I have 5 typically that I focus on. So cheating, bias, the limitations on what it knows again, and obviously as well, not just in education, but the way for people to misuse it for scams, for intentional negative use, whether it be on our students or anybody else as well. So there's all those things, but it's the same as everything else. Digital literacy skills, AI literacy skills will help navigate those. And in some ways, I actually don't want AI to be perfect. I don't want it to always give the perfect answer, because that would mean that our brains really would stop thinking. Students would go on and go, oh yeah, we can just trust that that is going to be the right answer and we don't have to look further. But I always want students to be able to say, okay, let me see what I'm seeing here. And is that correct? Do I know anything about whether it matches anything else of what other people are saying, actually using their thinking skills. And then the obviously big one is what I'm describing there, in that students do stop learning, stop critical thinking, but that is all on educators as well in teaching students how to use these properly and showing them new ways of learning. Like I always say to my students, use generative AI, but this is how you do it. So if that answers some of your question, I could actually talk about this for a long time, but I've kind of tried to highlight some things there.
I mean, Helen, you've given a good list of things we should worry about. I think I would add one more to that, which I think you kind of mentioned it in passing, which is about students not learning, and it's been called cognitive offloading, which is which is using AI as a substitute for learning, not as a support for learning. So that if you're a student who's under pressure and have to write an essay, it's much easier just to get the AI at least to write the first draft for you. If you're trying to learn something difficult in order to do an assignment, much easier just to get AI to look up the references for you to find the right sources. And so the danger, the worry is that you become over-reliant on AI such that all of those sorts of research and critical thinking capacities that we want students to have are going to be offloaded to AI. Now, the solution to that isn't more technology. And I really want to emphasize this. The solution is better pedagogy. And I think you can do it in two ways. One is that we need to start from what is good pedagogy? What are good ways of teaching, learning, and assessment? And then how can we then adapt education to a world that we know is going to be infused with AI? So, for example, with assessment, which every university that I've talked to is obsessing about still. With that, I think Sydney has taken the best approach to that, which is to have what they call a two-path or a two-lane approach, which is one, we have to make some of the assessment much more rigorous. We have to have invigilated exams, but far fewer of them. On the other hand, all of that sorts of assessment for learning that we've talked about for many years, so authentic assessment, project-based assessment, process assessment, AI can support that if we use it appropriately. So that's one thing, which is that is part of AI literacy, helping students to see how they can use AI to help them learn, not as a substitute to learn. But the other thing is, I think there's a real opportunity to design foundation models that are not just ethical, but are educational. There's been some connection between Anthropic, the AI company, and a couple of universities, one in the UK, King's College, I think one in Canada, which is trying to build new foundation models on education principles. And why not? I mean, if you're building them on ethical principles, then why not build them on good educational principles, like explain step by step. Don't just give the student the answer, but help them to come to their own answer. So we can build tools, and I really want universities, people who understand pedagogy, understand good teaching and learning, to work with the AI companies, particularly the more ethical ones, and the open access, open source ones, to try and build foundation models that are based on good educational principles. Why not?
My concern, as I was saying in the chat, was the extent to which this risks empowering the empowered and creating more disequity. That this all works for people with inside education systems who are literate, if nothing else, not digitally literate, but just literate, and how, yeah, this risks widening social and economic chasms, and I don't know, which is clearly a political question rather than an educational one.
Yeah, can I answer? Well, gives you some examples of where I'm seeing the very opposite of that. Well, this is for many of these AI systems, and there's so many out there now, I always kind of show the free stuff. I kind of focus on that because that's what we know most people have access to with internet, and internet's going very global now. We're seeing very different things. It's like, I'll give you two examples. Students going home from school, they may have parents that are very learned, academic, that can help them with their homework, do all sorts of things. maybe even get them a personal tutor to help them on the side. Students going to poorer homes don't have that access. They don't have often access to parents that have the ability to help them with homework. They can't send them off to pay for a personal tutor. This is providing that access to not just bypass the parents can sit there with them and then they can say, okay, we've got this mathematical problem, help us step by step work through how to solve this. So this is providing huge equity bump that way. The other story I have is in South Africa. I was working at the University of Johannesburg, and I was talking to students there, college students, and they were saying, really, from here, we've got some college experience, but we often have to just go into these low-end jobs. We have to go that way. But now with AI, we don't have to do that. One gave me an example that they had an idea of a business they wanted to start. They didn't have money for marketing, someone to help build their business proposal, all these different things that people with money have. They said, we use ChatGPT. I put my ideas in. I said, help me develop this business plan. What should I do for marketing? Help me figure out what my website should have. And they went for a free website. And they said, we went straight from having to go into these low-end jobs to suddenly we've got our own business, all through ways now that people with money that could have it before, but now AI has completely turned that around. So that's, to me, is very exciting in the way that this tool that is free, once you have the internet, can actually do that.
I know John has some comments here, but we have about a little over 5 minutes left. And I want to get to Punya's question first, and we'll go to John after that. So Punya.
Thank you. I don't think we have enough time to get into what I wanted us to go, the direction we want to go, because it's a big topic. But I want to talk a little bit, and this is going to be more of a comment than a question, and people can respond briefly to this point that was made about that, that the concern about large cultures steamrolling sort of ideas into other cultures and so on. And there's a fundamental tension here personally for me. Like, I grew up in India. Some of the best reading and all I did was in the British Council. And some of the best texts that I read there were those written for the Open University. I remember reading about cognitive science and psychology and all of those things, going to the British Council. You have to change 2 buses. I used to have multiple memberships so that I could go once a month and get 2 bags of books, and then I could go back the next month. And the ideas of the Enlightenment and all of those things were deeply powerful, made me who I am today in some ways. And so I find the tension there, because I recognize the point being made, that are certain perspectives being steamrolled, but there are also perspectives within that which I think are extremely liberatory and powerful, which have meant a lot to people across the world. And I wonder, that there's a tension here is all I'm saying. It's not that that's one that we can easily resolve, but one that we need to recognize as well. And that brings me to the point about like Gen AI and things that way. When I am looking at the American government saying Gen AI needs to support free speech as long as it doesn't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and does not talk about climate change. When I hear of Grok, the richest man in the world, saying that we need to have anti-woke AI. I don't even know what that means, but the point is that political perspectives, ideologies are going to get embedded in these systems. They always are. And the scale of money that's involved in it, the fact that Google just went and released 30 AI tools default on for educators across the nation over the 4th of July weekend, without giving people a chance to question it, to think about what are the implications, and so on. I just feel that the forces here are so powerful in some ways. So again, clearly I am as befuddled as can be. About the tensions of what does it mean to take ideas from one culture and shove it on another. And there's a terrible history of that. I recognize that.
Yeah.
But I also want to speak to my personal experience of having learned a lot because of that. So there is that tension there. And then there is this tension between, I love this idea of the open AI, open models and so on. But when the forces of money and power are so strongly embedded within that, within certain models, 5 or 6 of them, how do you push back against it? So again, I would love to, I know we are short on time, would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I clearly am utterly confused.
Me too.
I don't know if I made any sense,
Ah.
but I, these are things that have really been troubling me, puzzling me, just at a personal level.
I don't think,
Okay.
yeah. Go on, Helen, you want to go?
You sure? I'll be quick. My quick one is people, it goes again back to AI literacy and having people think again about what they're seeing and knowing that there is bias. There's always going to be bias in everything because we are humans, and being able to make judgments. I don't think people should be on high saying, oh, people are not able to make judgments for themselves and we need to make judgments for them. Perhaps Grok, I want to put that on one side though. That's a different breed, maybe. But yeah, we need to have people thinking. We need to teach these skills, not just to formal education, but to everybody.
So the point I want to make is, yeah, there are powerful forces and there are powerful people, not least the most wealthy person in the world, who are on a mission not just to promote their own technology, but also to change the way we interact, to change the way we socialize, and to change the way we educate. So Elon Musk set up his Astronova school for people at SpaceX. He now wants to make that global, or at least he wants to roll it out across the US. And the guy who's developing the software for that, Chris Chrisman, has said, first step, we need to replace teachers with AI. So yeah, we need to respond. We need to fight back against this. This is just it's both bad pedagogy and it's also a complete misunderstanding of what teachers do. Teachers are not just knowledge delivery machines. Teaching is a caring profession, and we need to develop AI that supports the caring aspects of teaching and values humans and values human teachers. So these are things that we need to do to be able to counter these powerful forces. Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a very difficult time for the next few years. Whether we come through it, I don't know. But if we don't speak up now, then the powerful people will speak on our behalf.
I think I'm more or less on the same page and agreeing with what everyone has said. My concern always continues to be people outside education systems, but also I remember a remark from Johannes Cronje in South Africa saying that the common assumption is that getting an education will get you richer, but actually it's the case that being rich will get you educated. And actually, will AI make any difference? A benign difference or a malign difference? I don't know. But again, that kind of plays into Mike's remark about the people clearly sponsoring AI. All those people sitting next to Donald Trump when he was inaugurated, for example.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, guys. I know this is a big topic. We could be unpacking this for a while. I have lots of responses, not like answers as much as further things for us to think about. But I know we are at the end of the hour. I told you it'll fly by, and it did. So any last quick comments from either the hosts or the guests before we introduce the next episode?
And just thank everyone for listening. And my point is,
yes,
AI literacy, digital literacy, pay attention.
And mine will be critical AI literacy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also stay confident in your skills and yourself.
And I'll say thank you all for coming in today. 3 people who I've known for quite a while. Punya, why don't you introduce the next show? I'm not going to be here. I'll be up in Wisconsin. Punya.
All right. Yep. So again, thank you all of you for joining. Always fun, and thank you for spending your Saturday with us. That's always kind and gentle and generous of you. Next week we are going to do a host reflect, and that's been a while since we have done that. We usually used to do this every 5 episodes or so. 4 or 5 episodes or so, but I was looking back and I think we did one way back in fall. I don't think we have done one in a while, so it'll be good to get back to that, just to get a chance to hang out, reflect on all the stuff that's happening in the world, in education and outside of it, as well as the episodes that have come before. We will meet at noon Eastern, 2nd of August, and look forward to seeing you then. Thank you again, and have a great, wonderful weekend.